Hey guys, it's Mr. Lupton, and welcome to our first lesson this week on using Excel. As a reminder, this is really a review of how to do formatting, formulas, and functions in Excel. And we're going to be looking at a data set here that is from the MBA. We're looking at Giannis, who is a very tall Greek NBA player, one of the better players in the league, according to most people, and one of the leading candidates for MVP this past season before everything was taken down. And so we're looking at his data, and there's a few things going on here. One, the data looks kind of boring, so we're going to reformat it. Two, there are some pieces of data that are missing that we need to do the calculations for. And three, there's some maybe more complicated data to tell us more about Giannis's overall career that we want to know about here as well. So everything that we're going to do in here is geared towards really those three things: formatting, using formulas to tell us a little bit more about him, and using functions to get us a little bit deeper into understanding his data. So as we go through this, I'm going to encourage you guys to follow along, to stop and pause the video as needed to do what you need to do. And also to pause before I show you something, because if you feel like you know how to do it and you don't need me to walk through it, that's a really good thing, because that means you know it and you don't need the instruction again, which is good for next week when we actually have a quiz of sorts on how to do all these things in Google Sheets. So we're going to get started with the formatting section first. So the first thing we're asked to do here is to bold and center all of the column headings in row one. To do that, I'm going to click on the one to highlight all of row one together. I could just as easily drag everything across. I could start at the beginning here and drag across to do this all the way to the end. But again, I just prefer to click on the one to do this. And we want to bold and center. So I'm going to click on my B to bold everything. And I'm going to click on my drop down alignment to center. So pretty straightforward for formatting task number one. Our second formatting task is we want to adjust the column width. Right now, we have to kind of scroll over quite a bit to see all of our information, but we have quite a bit of blank space here. So if I just start on the C and drag over all the way to column W, I can then right click any of these column headings to go to resize column C through W, and I want to reduce it down to 50. That takes care of that, and as you can see now, I don't have to scroll anywhere to see all of my data. The next piece I want to do is change the background color of row one to make the background color dark green and all the text white. So again, I'm going to click on the one to highlight the whole row. And I'm going to click on the fill color first and choose a dark green, not the darkest green, which would be dark green 3, but dark green 2. And then I'm going to go to my text color and choose white, really just to match the Bucks team colors here, to make it look more authentic for Giannis and his team. All right, the next piece is I want to alternate background colors between even and odd number of rows. And really we do this to make everything a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to go ahead and choose row 2 and choose this light green 2 as my first one. I'm going to do the same thing in 4 and the same thing in 6 and the same thing in 8. And again, the reason why we do this is to make it easier to differentiate between rows as we're looking at it. And we use the green because, again, it represents the colors of the team that he's on. All right, the next step, we don't have to do anything to the white because it's already white. The next step was we want to add borders all around every cell in in range A1. So I click here on A1. And we want to do all the way to W8. So basically I'm picking all of my data set here. And I want to come add borders. So I click the border button and voila, we have borders. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze columns A and B. Now, right now, I don't have to scroll, but as we do some of these other activities, it's going to cause us to create some more columns. So I want to be able to hold on to the content of A and B to see it no matter how far over I scroll. So to do this, I'm just going to go to View and Freeze, and I'm going to choose two columns to get A and B. And again, right now I can't do anything with this. But once I get down to adding some more columns, you'll see why this becomes an advantage. All right, so we're ready to move on to formulas now. The first formula we want to do is to calculate the field goal percentage for all 7 seasons. We're going to have to do this for each one, sort of. I'll explain why more in a minute. So to calculate field goal percentage, we just use the formula that's shown here, field goals made divided by field goals attempted, and we want this to be a number with 1 decimal place. So I'm going to use the equal sign. Anytime we're putting in a formula or a function, we always start with the equal sign. And I'm going to choose cell F2 for his field goals made, put in my division sign, and then choose cell G2 for the field goals attempted. And notice I can look on the function bar right here to check on my formula and see that it's right, and it should match what I have right here. So when I hit enter, it's going to give me the field goal. Now yours will probably look a little different than mine. Yours will probably look like a number with decimal places. So what you want to do to fix that is first of all, click the percent sign. And then after that, you'll want to reduce down your decimal places so that there's only one. So your final field goal percent will look just like mine does on the screen right now. So from here, I can either do the same process for each of these rows, or I could actually click and use my blue box in the bottom right corner of my cell H2 and drag down to the bottom. Now notice when I do that, it actually changes the background color, because when you do the drag and drop, it doesn't just do the function, it also takes the formatting with it. So I'm going to show you guys a little trick real quick. I just hit Control Z to get rid of that. And I'm going to do the second row the same way I did the first, equals field goals made divided by field goals attempted. And again, you might have to format this to be a percentage with only 1 decimal place. But now that I have it green then white, if I select both of these cells, H2 and H3, and then I use my drag and drop, notice it was actually going to be just fine in terms of using the right formatting for that. So Excel is smart enough to figure that out for us. So that's the first piece here. For my answer here, all I want to do is tell it where I put it. So I'm just going to put column H is where that answer is. For formula number 2, I want to go calculate the total rebounds for each of the 7 seasons that Giannis had. So to calculate total rebounds, I have to do offensive rebounds plus defensive rebounds. And these are per game averages. So to do this, I'm going to click in the cell Q2 for rebounds, type in my equal sign, choose O2 plus P2, and hit enter. So average 13.8 rebounds per game this year. And I'll do the same thing for the year before, just so the formatting can work out right. So similar number, 12.5, 13.8, his average went up a little bit. And then I will highlight both of these cells again and do my drag and drop to cause the same thing to happen. And we see over the course of his career, his rebounding numbers have continually gone up. So Giannis is getting better and better at the rebounding game. So I see that that was in column Q. I'm going to put column Q in here and move on to formula task number 3, which is to calculate his assist to turnover ratio. This one is kind of a number that lets us know how good the player is at getting his teammates involved and not losing the ball for his team. So for a point guard, these are usually around 3. For a big guy like Giannis, between 1 and 2 is usually pretty okay. So we'll check out and see how Giannis is doing on this. So again, we start with the equal sign. We always start with the equal sign. Assists, which is R2, divided by turnovers, which is S2, and we hit enter. And so this past year he was 1.6 again for a big guy. He's not doing too bad there. And we'll do something similar from his last year. 1.6 again. And so same process we've been using, highlight both of those, drag and drop down. And we see 1.6, 1.6, 1.6. So he's been pretty consistent over the past 3 seasons. Even the 2 seasons before that, he was pretty close to those numbers as well. And those are up from his first 2 years in the league, which again, that makes pretty good sense since he was learning how to adapt to playing in the NBA. So we just say here that we have found this information in column T, and we keep going. The next piece, calculate turnovers forced. So we want to figure out how good Giannis is at causing the other team to lose the ball. So turnovers forced, we're going to add his steals to his blocks. So again, we use the equal sign, U2 plus V2. And this past year, he was at 2. And if we look at his previous year, U3 plus V3, he was at 2.8. And we're going to highlight those two and drag and drop down and see that again, his first 2 years, he was still kind of learning it. But then, since then, 2.6, 3.5, 2.9, 2.8, and 2, he's actually been a little bit better each of his past 4 years than he was this year. So I'd be curious to try to figure out why that might be. But now that we have that data, we just put in column W here. And we're ready to move on to the functions section. So the functions, this is where we use some built-in calculation tools from Google Sheets. Excel is the same way. And these help us do some things that would otherwise take us a lot more effort to do. So the first thing we want to do is just figure out how many total games Giannis has played. So this time I'm going to start in the answer here box, and I want to put in my equal sign. And because I'm looking for a total number of something, I'm going to start with a sum function. So I put in, after the equal sign, the word SUM and an open parenthesis. And I'm going to come up, and I'm looking for his total number of games played. So I'm going to click and drag all of his GPs, which stands for game played, in column C. And you see that it equals sum C2 to C8. I want to close the parenthesis on that. You can see it in the function box, as well as kind of sitting over here in column O. And when I hit enter, you see it tells me over his career he has played in 522 games. It's just a addition problem where it added up these numbers for us. So nice, easy, good way to go about things. Sometimes we're going to have to be a little bit more complex. So with this one, we want to calculate. We want a function that calculates which year he averaged the most minutes per game. So we can look at this and pretty quickly see, 2017-18, he averaged 36, 37 minutes a game. That was his most. But we want Excel to be able to do this for us, or in this case, Google Sheets to be able to do this for us. In case we have a large data set where we don't want to have to trust ourselves to get this right. So we're going to use a function called max, which is short for maximum. So we put in equals max and open parenthesis. And I'm going to highlight his minutes column. And it's going to tell us that his most minutes played per game in a season was 36.7. Now, because this question is saying which year, we could certainly come next to this and say 36.7 was in the 2017-18 year. We'll add that in there just to get that extra bit of data. But this is, again, using a function to tell us the information that we want to know. All right, next piece, we want to use a combination of functions and formulas to calculate the total number of points scored in all seasons. So here's where we're going to have to do a little bit more work. First thing we want to do is I'm going to right click on column F and insert a brand new column. And I'm going to call this brand new column T points for total points, because his points column right here is just an average. How much did he score per game is what this column tells us. What we want here is his total points that he scored in the season. And so we're not going to know exactly how many, but we can get a pretty good estimate by doing a little bit of math. So here's where our formula comes in. We're going to put in the equal sign and put in his per game points. And if we multiply it by the number of games he played, it should give us a pretty good estimate of how many points he had scored this season. I'm going to get rid of the fraction, or the decimal place, I should say, because you can't have a decimal place in this situation. And I'm going to do the same thing right below it, points times game played, and hit enter. And again, come back here and get rid of that little decimal point. And then I'm going to drag and drop down to put in all of these total points. Now, what a lot of times people would want to do is they would just want to average this points column, and that's going to give us a much different number than the approach that we're doing here. So what people might do is average this column and then multiply it by the total number of games played to try to get the right number, and that really won't give you the right results. Mathematically, you're doing something different there, and you're welcome to try it to see. But now that we have his total points in every season that he played, we can actually come down here. And again, we want to calculate the total number of points scored in all seasons. So it's a total. So we use a sum function. Anytime we see total, we know the sum function needs to go there. We're going to highlight his T points column, close our parenthesis, and hit enter to tell us how many points roughly he scored. His actual total points might be slightly different, but based on the data we have, this is kind of the best answer we can get. All right, next one up. We'll calculate the number of seasons the player averaged 5 assists per game, 5 or more. So this is a funny one, because with assists, we can again look at this list and say 1, 2, 3. The answer is 3. And that is true. But if we had a larger data set, which people with spreadsheets are often working with very large data sets, we would actually want, again, the computer, the software to do this for us. So we're going to use a function called countIf. This is going to count every time a specific criteria is met. So here's how this works. So I put in equals countIf and open parenthesis, and I highlight the range of all of his seasons of assists. After that, I'm going to put in a comma. I'm going to put in a quotation mark and say greater than 5. And so what this is showing us is we're going to look through this range of cells and count every time the number that we see is greater than 5. So when I hit enter on this, it gives me 3, which again, we can come back here and visually check 1, 2, 3. But if we needed to do this again for a very large data set, that function gives us the ability to do that in a very easy way. All right, last one. Let's look at how to calculate his career percentage on 3-point shots. And again, kind of the silly way to do this would just to be to average these percentages together, but that doesn't take into account that some years he had a lot more 3-point attempts than others. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to insert some more columns. So insert a column, insert a column. And we want to figure out how many threes he took. So we know that if he made 1.5 a game, we can do 1.5 times 57. So he made about 85.5, and you can't make a fraction, so we're going to make that a whole number. And here we're going to figure out how many he attempted, because that's how we're going to have to get his average. So 3-pointers attempted times his game played. And again, we're going to drop his decimal point here. So this is going to be T 3 p.m. This is going to be T 3 PA for total 3-pointers attempted. And we're going to go in and again do this for our second row as well, so that we can do the drag and drop. So equals 3 points attempted times his number of games played. Get rid of his extra decimal point. Again, come here. 3 points attempted times number of games played. The decimal point, and now we can drag and drop and drag and drop. So this gets us part of the way. But remember, the task wants us to calculate his percentage. So to calculate his percentage, we need to add up his made shots and divide it by his attempted shots. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a formula inside of a function. So we're going to do sum to calculate his total number of three-pointers made. So we're going to sum up all of column K. And we're going to divide that by the sum of column M, which is his total three-pointers attempted. So functionally what we have here is his three-pointers made divided by his three-pointers attempted. So we hit enter. And we're going to change this to a percentage, and we're going to drop it down to only one decimal place and see that he is about a 28.7% career three-point shooter. So if we had kind of taken the easy way and just averaged this whole column, not taking into account some years he took more threes than others, we would get that he's a 27 career three-point shooter versus his 28.7. So we would have been shortchanging him a little bit based on his previous career percentages, probably because if we look at the numbers here, his average in 2014-15 was really bad, but he didn't take that many shots that year. So this would be really weighing down his average overall, which is why his number from the average year is different than his number for the average year. So we got to make sure we're thinking about the math behind this and then using the tools in Excel to help us answer the questions well. So this is everything you guys need to see for this part of the lesson. I look forward to getting you guys into activity number 2. If you have any questions about this, of course, please let me know, and I will be happy to help you out with that. Until then, take care. Adios.